My name is Cora Vance. I am 32 now, and the life I've built is one of quiet intention, filled with the scent of turpentine and the warm Texas sun. But my story truly begins at 16, under the cold, impersonal lights of the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, with the weight of my sketchbook in my carry-on and a silence in my ears where my mother's footsteps should have been. Her final words to me weren't a shout, but a whisper of indifference that has echoed through the years. "You're resourceful, Cora. You'll manage." She didn't look back. That single moment of severance was not an end, but an unforeseen, painful, and ultimately beautiful beginning. It was the crack in the canvas that forced me to paint an entirely new world for myself. My childhood, for a time, felt like a watercolor painting, soft at the edges and luminous with color. We lived on Bainbridge Island, a short, misty ferry ride from Seattle. Our home was a cedar-shingled cottage nestled amongst towering Douglas firs, with a garden my mother, Annalise, tended with an artist's eye. She was a painter, her canvases filled with the moody blues and greens of the Puget Sound. My father, Julian, was an architect, a man who believed in strong foundations, both in buildings and in life. I was their only child, and for 12 years, our little world felt complete and secure. Dad would take me on the ferry to his Seattle office on Saturdays, letting me sketch the city skyline from his window. Mom would set up an easel for me beside hers in the garden, teaching me how to see the light, not just the object it fell upon. Holidays were a tapestry of handmade decorations, the smell of baking bread, and the comforting rhythm of our shared lives. The first hairline cracks in our foundation appeared when I was 11. They began as hushed conversations that ceased the moment I entered a room, a subtle tension that coiled around the dinner table. Dad started spending more nights in his home office, his drafting table littered with designs that never seemed to get built. I'd find Mom staring out at the gray water for hours, her own canvases gathering dust in the corner of her studio. I pretended not to see it, clinging to the belief that all families had their quiet storms. Then came the evening I found her in the garden, not painting, but methodically pulling up her prize-winning roses, one by one. The divorce papers were on the kitchen table later that week. "Your father's dreams are too big for this little island, Cora," she told me, her voice hollow. It was years before I understood the complexities behind that statement, the financial pressures, the creative frustrations, and the slow drifting apart of two people who had once shared a single vision. The divorce was swift. Dad moved to Austin, Texas, to chase a new architectural venture he believed in, promising his move was a temporary necessity to rebuild, not an abandonment. He swore he'd call every week and fly me down for holidays. Mom was granted primary custody, and we stayed in the cottage, sustained by alimony checks that she often lamented were never quite enough. For the first 2 years, I lived for Dad's Sunday calls and his infrequent visits. His voice, warm and steady, was an anchor in my shifting world. Mom, however, seemed to view my bond with him as a form of betrayal. "He chose to leave us, Cora," she would say, her tone sharp, twisting his difficult choice into a personal rejection of us. When I was 14, the landscape of our lives changed again. Mom met Victor Thorne at a Seattle gallery opening. He was a financier, recently divorced, exuding an aura of wealth and unshakable confidence. He had 2 children close to my age. Their romance was a whirlwind, a stark contrast to the slow, gentle rhythm of my parents' life together. Within 6 months, Victor and his children, 15-year-old Owen and 13-year-old Isabel, moved into our small cottage. Suddenly, the house that had always felt like a sanctuary felt claustrophobic. My sun-drenched attic room, which had been my personal art studio, was renovated into a bedroom for Isabel. Owen took over the den where Dad's old architectural books still lined the shelves. "We have to make them feel welcome, Cora," Mom explained, her voice carrying a new, anxious edge. "They've been through so much." It was a strange irony. Their trauma was to be cushioned at every turn, while my own was expected to be silently absorbed. The dynamics of our home shifted almost overnight. Mom, my free-spirited, paint-stained mother, began to transform. She traded her comfortable linens for designer labels, her quiet evenings in the garden for fundraising galas in the city. Our traditional Sunday morning walks on the beach were replaced by brunch at Victor's country club. He referred to Owen and Isabel as the kids, while I became Annalise's daughter in conversations with their new friends. The small slights grew into gaping inequalities. When Owen turned 16, Victor bought him a brand new BMW. When I got my license a few months later, Mom suggested I could borrow her car if she wasn't using it. Isabel was given a $1,000 shopping spree for her birthday. For mine, I received a gift card to a bookstore, which I later learned Mom had paid for herself. Victor is so generous with his money, she would say when I gently questioned the disparity. We should feel fortunate. My father sensed the shift during his visits, which became less frequent and more strained. You seem quiet, Sparrow, he said during a brief Christmas visit when I was 15, using his old nickname for me. Is everything all right at home? I downplayed my unhappiness, not wanting to add to his burdens. He looked tired, his clothes well-worn, and the modest, thoughtful gifts he brought felt worlds away from the diamond earrings Victor had just given my mother. Dad tried to maintain our connection across the miles. He sent letters I now suspect I never received and made calls that often went unanswered. He proposed I spend a summer with him in Austin, but Mom dismissed the idea, citing his unstable living situation and the Texas heat. It was only much later I'd discover the extent of her interference, the birthday packages that were never given to me, the scheduled flights that were canceled without my knowledge. School became my only refuge. I poured myself into my art, winning a regional award for a series of charcoal sketches depicting the island's changing coastline. I brought the small trophy home, my heart buzzing with a rare flicker of excitement, only to find the house empty. They were in Seattle, celebrating Owen's acceptance onto the varsity lacrosse team. My trophy found a home on my bedside table. The shelves in the living room were cleared to make space for Owen's athletic awards. I made attempts to connect with my step-siblings, but they were a closed-off unit. Owen treated me with a cool indifference, unless he needed help with his homework. Isabel was more subtly dismissive, making passing comments about my secondhand clothes or my quiet friends, reinforcing the idea that I didn't quite fit their polished new family image. When I tried to talk to Mom about it, she sighed. You need to try harder, Cora. Be a little more outgoing, like Isabel. By my 16th year, I had become a ghost in my own childhood home. I sat at the dinner table in silence while Victor pontificated about Owen's college prospects and Isabel's social calendar. Mom, who had once been my fiercest champion, now seemed to see me through Victor's critical lens, noticing only the ways I failed to complement the perfect picture he was trying to create. Financial decisions were made without me, but I overheard enough to know Victor was in complete control. My mother, once so independent, now had to justify every expense related to me. Cora needs new art supplies, she'd say, her tone apologetic, as if my passion were an indulgence. Despite it all, I never saw what was coming. I couldn't fathom that the woman who taught me to see the light in the world could one day leave me in the dark. But looking back, the signs were all there, like faint pencil lines on a canvas, sketching out a picture of my own dispensability. I just refused to see it. The announcement came on a damp February evening, the scent of rain and pine heavy in the air. Victor tapped his wine glass with a spoon, a gesture that always signaled an important declaration. I have a surprise, he said, his smile aimed squarely at my mother and his children. I've booked us a trip for spring break. 2 weeks in Japan, for the Cherry Blossom Festival. Isabel gasped with delight, and Owen gave a rare, approving nod. Mom's hand flew to her chest. Oh, Victor, that's incredible. How wonderfully generous. I sat still, a small knot of anticipation tightening in my stomach, waiting for my inclusion. After a few minutes of their excited chatter about Tokyo and Kyoto, I finally found my voice. That sounds amazing. I've always wanted to see Hokusai's work in person. A strange, unreadable look passed between Mom and Victor. Yes, well, it will be quite an experience, Victor said, his tone noncommittal. In the weeks that followed, the house buzzed with preparations. Mom and Isabel went on long shopping trips to Seattle for new outfits and luggage. Victor arranged for an international data plan for Owen's phone. Whenever I asked what I should pack or if I needed to renew my passport, the answers were vague. "Don't worry about the details just yet, Cora," Mom would say. "Just focus on your schoolwork." A week before we were scheduled to leave, I found a detailed itinerary printed on the kitchen island. It listed flight details, hotel reservations in Tokyo and Kyoto, and tickets for the Shinkansen bullet train. For names were listed: Victor, Annalise, Owen, and Isabel. I carried the papers to my mother, who was folding laundry in the utility room. "The itinerary only lists 4 people," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Is there a mistake?" She wouldn't meet my eyes, her focus intense on smoothing a wrinkle from one of Victor's shirts. "Victor is handling all the logistics. I'm sure it's all in order." I tried to cling to that flimsy reassurance, but a cold seed of dread had taken root. I started packing anyway, pulling out my warmest sweaters and reading about Japanese art. I spent my own small savings on a new sketchbook and a set of high-quality travel pencils. The night before our departure, I was putting the finishing touches on my packing when I heard their voices from the master bedroom down the hall. "She's going to make a scene at the airport, Annalise," Victor said, his voice laced with irritation. What was I supposed to do, Victor? Mom's voice was strained. Just tell her she wasn't invited? I was clear from the start. This trip is for our family. She's never made an effort to be a part of it. She's my daughter. And you've done your duty by her. She's 16, not a child. A little disappointment won't harm her." Their voices dropped to a murmur, and I couldn't hear the rest. I sat on my bed, the room spinning slightly. My carefully packed suitcase suddenly seemed pathetic and naive. Surely Mom wouldn't let this happen. She just wouldn't. The next morning, the air in the car on the way to Seattle-Tacoma was thick with unspoken words. I tried to talk about the famous bamboo forest in Kyoto, but my comments were met with monosyllabic replies. When we pulled up to the departure's curb, Victor handed a folder of documents to my mother. "You handle this," he instructed, before guiding Owen and Isabel toward the check-in kiosks for Japan Airlines. Mom turned to me, her face a carefully composed mask. "Cora, there's been a slight change of plans." "What kind of change?" My voice was small, barely a whisper. You won't be coming with us to Japan." The words didn't feel real. They hung in the air between us, nonsensical. "What? Why? Is it my passport? Did something go wrong?" Victor feels. He feels this should be a bonding trip. For just us and the kids. He thinks you're mature enough to manage at home for a couple of weeks. The pieces clicked into place, sharp and painful. "You're leaving me. After all this, you're just leaving me here." My voice was rising, attracting glances from people rushing past. "Don't make a scene," she hissed, her eyes darting toward Victor. "It's not about choosing. It's just a trip." "If it's just a trip, why couldn't I come?" Her composure finally cracked, a flicker of raw honesty in her eyes. "Because Victor is paying Cora. And he decided who was going." She reached into her purse and pulled out a few bills. "Here's $300. For groceries and things. You can take a shuttle back to the island. Mrs. Adler next door knows to check in on you." I stared at the money in her hand, my mind struggling to process the transaction. She was paying me off for my own abandonment. "You drove me all the way here, let me pack my bags, just to do this?" "You're being dramatic," she said. The shame in her eyes quickly shuddered. "You're resourceful, Cora. You'll manage." From the check-in line, Isabel's voice called out, "Mom, we need your passport." That was it. The final pull away from me and toward them. She looked from me to them, her loyalty cleaving in a single, silent moment. "I have to go," she said, pressing the cash into my unresisting hand. "I'll call you when we land in Tokyo. Be good." And then she turned and walked away, her carry-on gliding smoothly behind her. She never looked back. I watched her join them, watched Isabel turn and give me a small, triumphant little wave before they disappeared into the security line. "You'll manage." It wasn't an expression of confidence. It was an abdication of responsibility. I was alone in the cavernous, humming terminal, surrounded by the joy of reunions and the excitement of departures, with a handful of cash and the crushing understanding that the mother I knew, the artist who taught me to see the light, no longer existed. For how long I stood there, a statue of teenage grief amidst the river of travelers, I don't know. Time seemed to warp and dissolve. The crisp $300 in my hand felt like a final, insulting severance package. Reality only intruded when a janitor politely asked if I was all right, his cart bumping gently against my abandoned suitcase. I stumbled toward a row of hard plastic seats, my legs shaking. My phone felt heavy and useless in my hand. Who could I possibly call? My few close friends were away with their own families for spring break. The idea of returning to the empty cottage on the island, a space now haunted by my own insignificance, was suffocating. The thought of Mrs. Adler's pitying gaze as she checked in on me was even worse. "Sweetheart, are you lost?" A woman in an Alaska Airlines uniform approached me, her expression kind. Her name tag read Sophia. My throat closed up. I tried to speak, to explain, but all that came out was a choked sob. To my own horror, the floodgates opened, and I began to cry, not quiet tears, but the wrenching, body-shaking sobs of a child who has just understood the world is not a safe place. Sophia didn't say anything. She simply sat beside me, placing a warm, steady hand on my back. "It's okay," she murmured. "Just breathe." When the storm of tears subsided into shuddering breaths, I managed to tell her what had happened. Her kind expression hardened into one of quiet fury. "Your mother left you here?" "Alone." When I nodded, she stood up with purpose. "Come with me." She led me through a staff-only door into the quiet, fluorescent-lit corridors behind the public face of the airport. We ended up in a small, peaceful break room. "You can stay here and collect your thoughts," she said, handing me a bottle of water. "Do you have anyone you can call? A father? Grandparents?" The question hung in the air. My grandparents were gone. My other relatives were distant cousins of my mother. And then, there was Dad. I hadn't spoken to him in over a month. Our last call had been brief and stilted, with Mom hovering nearby. But he was my father. "I could call my dad," I said, the words tentative. "But he's in Austin. And it's complicated." "How complicated?" Sophia asked gently. "My mom has custody. She hasn't made it easy for us to connect." The realization bloomed as I said it aloud. It wasn't just not easy. It had been deliberately obstructed. "Complicated or not, he's your dad," Sophia said. "And what your mother did is called child abandonment. It's a crime." The word crime solidified the wrongness of it all. This wasn't just a family dispute, it was a fundamental breach of care. Sophia gave me some privacy, and with a trembling finger, I scrolled to Dad in my contacts. I braced myself for voicemail, but he answered on the second ring. "Cora? Is everything okay, Sparrow?" The sound of his old nickname for me broke through my remaining composure. The story tumbled out in a torrent of tears and fractured sentences: the Japan trip, the faked inclusion, being left at the gate with cash for a shuttle. "She just walked away, Dad. She didn't even turn around." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy and absolute. Then I heard him take a long, slow breath. "I'm coming to get you, Cora. Stay right where you are. But you're in Texas. I don't care if I'm on the moon. I'm coming. It will take me a few hours, but I am on my way. Are you safe right now? An airline lady is helping me. Her name is Sophia." "Good. Put her on the phone." I handed my phone to Sophia. She spoke with my father for a few minutes, her voice professional but reassuring, providing him with the details of my location. When she handed the phone back, Dad's voice was resolute. "Sophia will look after you until I get there. I'm leaving right now, Cora. I promise. I won't let you down." As I waited in the quiet room, Sophia brought me a warm sandwich from an employee cafe. The hours stretched on, and in that strange, suspended time, my mind replayed the last 4 years. The Christmas gifts from Dad that felt increasingly impersonal, as if chosen by a stranger. The calls that grew shorter and less frequent. The visits that were always canceled for one reason or another. Had he given up? Or had Mom built a wall between us, brick by invisible brick? 6 hours after my call, Sophia came back into the room, a slightly odd expression on her face. "Your father is here," she said. "And, honey, you failed to mention he was arriving on a private jet." "A what?" "Come on. He's waiting for you at the private aviation terminal." In a daze, I followed her through more corridors, out onto the tarmac, and into a separate, luxurious building I never knew existed. And there, standing on the rain-slicked pavement beside a sleek jet with the words, Aura Innovations painted subtly on its tail, was my father. He looked different. The tired, worn-down man from my memories was gone. In his place was a man who stood taller, dressed in a well-tailored jacket, his face radiating a confidence I hadn't seen since I was a little girl. But his eyes were the same. And they were filled with a fierce, protective love as they met mine. He crossed the distance between us in 3 long strides and wrapped me in a hug that felt like coming home. "I'm here, Sparrow," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with emotion. "I've got you. And I am never letting you go again." In that moment, with the low rumble of the jet engines in the background and the solid strength of my father's arms around me, I made a silent vow. I would not go back to that cottage. I would not grieve for a mother who could discard me so easily. Like my father, I would rebuild. And I would never again allow anyone to make me feel like I was disposable. The inside of the jet was a world away from the cold, impersonal airport terminal. Soft leather seats, gleaming wood paneling, and a flight attendant named Liam who immediately offered me a cup of hot chamomile tea. "Your father said it was your favorite," he told me with a gentle smile. I looked at Dad, startled he'd remember such a small detail. He sat across from me, his gaze never leaving my face, a turbulent mix of anger, relief, and profound sadness in his eyes. "Aura Innovations," I said, nodding toward the logo on the linen napkin. "That's new." Dad managed a faint smile. "A lot has changed, Sparrow. When I first moved to Austin, things were bad. The firm I joined went under. I was practically bankrupt. Mom said you chose your career over us." His jaw tightened. "That's the story she chose to tell, Cora. It's not the truth. The truth is, I was failing and I couldn't drag you and your mother down with me. I left to build something so I could properly provide for you. I never, not for 1 second, chose anything over you." As the plane climbed above the clouds, leaving the gray skies of Seattle behind, he told me the story of the last 4 years. He'd started a new company from his tiny apartment, focusing on sustainable architectural design and smart building technology. The first 2 years were a struggle, filled with 70-hour workweeks and ramen noodle dinners. Then, a breakthrough, a patented energy-efficient building material that had attracted major investors. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" I asked, my voice small. "About the success?" "I tried," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I sent letters. I left messages. I tried to arrange visits. I'm starting to think my messages weren't getting through." The puzzle pieces clicked into place, the unanswered calls, the lost birthday packages, the canceled trips. It wasn't him pulling away, it was Mom pushing him out. "I don't think they were," I whispered. He didn't look surprised, only deeply pained. "We'll sort that out later. Right now, what matters is you." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I need to know what you want, Cora. Not what I want or what the law dictates. What do you want to happen now?" No one had asked for my opinion, my desire, in so long. The answer rose up inside me, clear and certain. I don't want to go back. I can't. Not to that house, not to her and them. I felt like a piece of furniture they kept tripping over. Dad nodded slowly, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Then you won't. Austin has some of the best art programs in the country. My house has more than enough room. But this is a big decision. We'll take it one day at a time." We landed at a private airfield just outside Austin as the sun was setting, painting the vast Texas sky in fiery shades of orange and violet. A black car was waiting. The driver was a calm, professional woman named Evelyn, who Dad introduced as his assistant. "The guest suite is ready for her, Julian," she said. "And I've cleared your calendar for the rest of the week." For the foreseeable future, actually, Dad corrected her, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest. He was reorienting his entire world to make space for me. His home was nothing like our island cottage. It was a modern structure of glass, steel, and warm limestone, built into a hillside overlooking the rolling green of the Texas Hill Country. The guest suite was a self-contained apartment with its own living area, a spa-like bathroom, and a private balcony. On the desk was a brand new laptop and a professional-grade set of sketching pencils. That night was surreal. I stood under the spray of a waterfall shower, washing away the grime and grief of the airport. Dad knocked softly on my door later, holding 2 mugs of chamomile tea. "Thought you might have trouble sleeping," he said, sitting on the edge of the plush armchair. "Did you know?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "How bad it was?" He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I suspected things weren't right, Sparrow. On the phone, you always sounded muted, guarded. When I visited, you seemed to be folding in on yourself. But I never, in my worst nightmares, imagined she would do something like this." "What happens now?" "Tomorrow, we call Dominic Croft. He's the best family lawyer in the state. We'll figure out our options." He paused. "And while he handles the legal side of things, we'll handle the important side. We'll get to know each other again. For years is a long time. I've missed so much." "I've missed you too, Dad," I said, and the simple truth of it ached. After he left, I stepped out onto the balcony. The air was warm and smelled of cedar and dry earth. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Landed in Tokyo. So beautiful. Hope you got home all right." The casual, dismissive tone, after what she had done, sent a hot flash of anger through me. I powered the phone off and left it on the table. For the first time in a very long time, I fell asleep feeling utterly and completely safe. The next morning, Dad showed me the rest of the house. The tour ended in a large, light-filled room with a vaulted ceiling and a panoramic view of the hills. It was an empty space. "I always envisioned this as an art studio," he said, watching my face. "I remembered you won that award for your sketches. I thought, if you decide to stay, we could design it together." The fact that he knew about my award, that he had been tracking my life from afar, made my throat tighten with emotion. Later, Dominic Croft, a sharp, empathetic man, came to the house. I recounted the airport incident and the years of quiet marginalization that led up to it. "What your mother did is a clear case of child abandonment," Dominic stated, his tone firm. "And the pattern of parental alienation you've described is compelling. We have very strong grounds to petition for an immediate modification of the custody order." "Before we do anything," I said, surprised by my own resolve, "I want to get my things from the island. My art, my sketchbooks, my journals. Everything." Dominic and Dad exchanged a look. "We can arrange that," Dominic said. "But we need to do it correctly. We'll need to document the state of the home and your belongings." 2 days later, Dad, Dominic, and I flew back to Seattle on the jet, this time accompanied by a paralegal who would photograph and videotape everything. We took the ferry to the island, the familiar scent of salt and sea filling me with a strange mix of nostalgia and resolve. Using my key, we let ourselves into the silent cottage. It was exactly as we'd left it, except for a neat stack of mail on the kitchen counter, held together with a rubber band. It was all addressed to me. I sifted through it, my hands shaking. Birthday cards from Dad. Postcards from his business trips. A letter containing a check for a summer art program in Austin. A Christmas card with a gift certificate to my favorite art supply store in Seattle. All of them unopened. "She kept them from me," I whispered, holding out the stack of hidden correspondence to my father. His face, which had been set in grim lines, hardened into cold fury. "Document every single piece," he said to the paralegal. In my room, I found more. Tucked away in a box in my closet were the gifts he'd sent, still in their wrapping paper. As I packed my sketchbooks, my paints, and the few personal treasures that mattered, I felt a profound sense of detachment. This room, this house, was no longer mine. It was a museum of a life I was ready to leave behind. Before we left, I took a piece of my own sketching paper and wrote a short, simple note. "I am with Dad. I am safe. My lawyer will be in touch." I placed it on the kitchen counter, right next to the damning pile of unopened mail. As our plane ascended into the clouds, I didn't look down at the receding island. My past was there. My future was waiting for me in the warm, bright light of Texas, with a father who had crossed a country to prove he had never really left at all. My first few months in Austin were a whirlwind of healing and new beginnings. Dad enrolled me at Westwood Preparatory, a school known for its outstanding arts program. Dominic Croft filed the emergency custody motion, and a therapist, a warm and insightful woman named Dr. Lena Sharma, began helping me unpack the complex trauma of the abandonment. A betrayal by a primary caregiver is one of the deepest wounds a person can experience, Dr. Sharma told me in our first session. Be patient with yourself, Cora. Healing isn't a straight line. Meanwhile, Mom and Victor returned from Japan to find my empty room and my note. The calls and texts began, escalating from feigned concern to furious demands. On Dominic's advice, I didn't answer, though each buzz of my phone sent a jolt of anxiety through me. She gave up her right to an immediate explanation when she walked away from you at that airport, Dad said gently, finding me staring at my phone one evening. You owe her nothing right now but your own peace of mind. Starting at a new school mid-semester should have been terrifying, but Westwood was different. On my first day in advanced studio art, a girl with vibrant pink streaks in her hair and a friendly smile introduced herself as Maya. She saw me struggling to find the right charcoal and offered me one of hers. Newbie, right? She'd said. Don't worry, the art nerd tribe is very welcoming here. Maya became my first true friend, someone who knew me only as Cora, the artist from Austin, not as Annalise's quiet daughter or Victor's inconvenient stepdaughter. For the first time in years, I felt seen for who I was. You're different here, Dad observed one night as we ate dinner on the patio, the sky ablaze of color. You stand taller. I feel like I can breathe, I admitted. Dad was rebuilding our relationship with the same meticulous care he put into his architectural designs. He blocked out his afternoons to be home when I got back from school. We spent weekends exploring the hill country, our sketchbooks and cameras in hand. He came to every parent-teacher conference and art show, his pride in my work open and unreserved. When he learned I was interested in digital art, he not only bought me the best software but also arranged for me to take private lessons with a professor at the University of Texas. Your talent is a foundation, Sparrow, he said. It deserves to be built upon properly. The legal battle was swift and decisive. Dominic presented the mountain of evidence, the airport abandonment, the documented proof of the intercepted mail and gifts, and my own testimony. Mom's lawyer tried to argue that Dad was an absentee parent trying to take advantage of the situation, but the judge saw through it. 3 months after I arrived in Austin, we flew to Seattle for the final custody hearing. Seeing Mom across the courtroom was like looking at a stranger. She was impeccably dressed, but she looked diminished, her confidence replaced by a brittle anxiety. The judge, a stern woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, addressed my mother directly. Mrs. Thorne, leaving your 16-year-old daughter at an international airport is not a misunderstanding, as your counsel suggests. It is a profound and illegal act of abandonment. Coupled with the clear pattern of parental alienation, this court has no hesitation. She banged the gavel. Full legal and physical custody is hereby granted to the father, Mr. Julian Vance. Mom seemed to shrink in her chair. Victor, sitting behind her, glanced at his watch. Outside the courthouse, Mom cornered us. You've ruined our family, she accused Dad. No, Annalise, Dad replied, his voice devoid of anger, only a deep sadness. You did that. You did that when you chose your new life over the child we created together. I need to speak to Cora, she demanded. Dad looked at me, a question in his eyes. I nodded. Once he was out of earshot, her composure shattered. Why are you doing this to me, Cora? Do you have any idea how this makes me look? Victor's colleagues, our friends, everyone is talking. The breath left my body. After everything, her primary concern was social standing. You left me at an airport, Mom. You chose a vacation over your own daughter. It wasn't like that, she insisted, the old justifications rising to the surface. You're always so dramatic. No, I said, taking a step back, creating a physical distance to match the emotional chasm between us. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being honest. And I'm not coming back. I found where I belong. He'll just disappoint you again, she warned. No, Mom, I said, my voice clear and steady. That was you. I turned to leave, then paused. The court ordered you to pay back years of child support, since you violated the custody agreement by blocking Dad's access. He's donating every penny to a charity that supports art programs for at-risk youth. I thought you should know. Returning to Austin felt like a true homecoming. The art studio Dad and I had designed was now complete, a sanctuary of light and possibility. I flourished at Westwood, my art-winning state-level competitions. My friendship with Maya deepened into a sisterhood. My relationship with Dad became the bedrock of my life. We had our traditions: Sunday morning breakfast tacos, monthly road trips to find new landscapes to paint, and a shared commitment to radical honesty. He was there for the big moments and the small ones, helping me study for my driver's test, bringing me soup when I was sick, and listening for hours as I debated college choices. The woman he'd been dating, his assistant Evelyn, slowly became a part of our lives. She was kind, steady, and respected my relationship with my father implicitly. She never tried to be a mother to me, but she became a cherished friend and confidant. Mom's attempts at contact dwindled to sporadic, guilt-laden emails and a generic Christmas card. I learned through the grapevine that her marriage to Victor was strained, the court case having tarnished the perfect image he so valued. On my 18th birthday, Dad gave me a portfolio case made of soft leather. Inside wasn't a gift, but a series of documents. He had legally established the Vance Foundation for Young Artists, funded by the back child support payments and a significant contribution of his own. "This is your legacy, Sparrow," he told me. "Born from a painful chapter, but it will create so many beautiful new stories for others." I looked at him, my father, who had not only rescued me but had shown me how to transform pain into purpose. The girl left alone in the airport was gone. In her place was a young woman who knew her own worth, who was surrounded by authentic love, and who was just beginning to paint the canvas of her own life. Senior year was a whirlwind of college applications and portfolio preparations. In the spring, I received the news: a full artistic scholarship to the Rhode Island School of Design, my dream school. The same week, I got a terse email from my mother. "Victor and I have divorced. I'm back in the cottage on Bainbridge." I thought you should know. I showed the email to Dad. "What do you think I should do?" "That's entirely up to you, Sparrow," he said, a practice he'd perfected over the years. "What does your heart tell you?" My heart, after years of therapy and healing, felt not anger, but a quiet, sad peace. I typed a simple reply: "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you're okay." Her response was immediate: "I miss you, Cora. Could we talk?" After a long conversation with Dr. Lena Sharma, I agreed to a video call. The face that appeared on my screen was one I barely recognized. The polished, wealthy veneer was gone. She looked tired and profoundly lonely. "You look so grown up," she said, her voice thick. "So happy." "I am," I said, keeping my voice gentle but firm, a boundary in itself. "I made so many mistakes, Cora," she said, the words I never thought I'd hear. I let his world swallow me. I was so afraid of losing it all that I lost the one thing that should have mattered most. "You made choices, Mom," I said, echoing Dr. Lena Sharma's words. "I know." Tears streamed down her face. "I know. And I have to live with them." When I came back to this empty house, all I could see were all the ghosts of what I threw away. "Will you ever forgive me?" she asked, her voice a whisper. I took a deep breath. "I've forgiven you for my own sake, Mom. I had to move on." But forgiveness and trust are two different things. Rebuilding trust, that's a different journey. And I don't know if we're there yet. It was a start. Not an absolution, but a crack of light in a long-closed door. The most surreal encounter came a few months later. I was in Austin for the summer, hosting the first-ever student showcase for the Vance Foundation. As I was speaking to a young, talented painter, a man approached me hesitantly. It was Victor Thorne. He looked older, his expensive suit doing little to hide the weariness in his eyes. "Impressive," he said, gesturing at the vibrant, art-filled room. "Your mother told me what you've built." "Thank you," I said, my composure unwavering. "I wanted to apologize," he said, stumbling over the word. "The way I treated you. The trip. It was wrong. My own children. They don't look at me the same way since they found out the full story. Isabel told me I was a bully who broke his own family. She was right." He handed me a card. I've set up a fund to match all donations to your foundation up to $1 million. It's the least I can do. After he left, Dad found me looking at the card. You okay? I think, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. I think that's what closure feels like. Today, at 32, I live in a small, light-filled house in Santa Fe with my husband, a fellow artist I met in college. My studio opens into a garden that smells of sage and chamomile, and the Vance Foundation now has chapters in 3 states. My relationship with my father is the constant, steady rhythm of my life. He and Evelyn are blissfully happy, doting grandparents to my 5-year-old daughter, Rose. My mother and I have found a new, fragile kind of relationship. She visits once or twice a year. We talk about art, about the weather, about the surface-level things that are safe. The deep, painful wounds have scarred over, and while the memory remains, it no longer has the power to hurt me. She is trying, in her own way, to be a grandmother to Rose, and for my daughter's sake, I allow it with careful, loving boundaries. Sometimes, when I'm tucking Rose into bed, I think about that 16-year-old girl standing alone at Seattle-Tacoma. I don't feel pity for her anymore. I feel a profound sense of gratitude. Her painful ending was the catalyst for my true beginning. It led me back to a father whose love was a lighthouse in the storm. It taught me to build my own foundations, to value my own voice, and to understand that family is not about blood or obligation. It is about who shows up. It is about who stays. The greatest lesson I learned is that you cannot control when someone walks out of your life, but you have absolute power over who you allow to walk in. The life I have built is not in spite of my broken past, but because of it. It is a canvas layered with pain, healing, resilience, and an abundance of light. And it is, finally and completely, my own masterpiece.